What if I told you the secret to getting the film look on your digital photo without having a film camera, buying expensive rolls of film, nor having to get your film developed in a lab? Well, let me let you in on the secret sauce to achieving this amazing film look without breaking the bank. Dehancer. So what is Dehancer anyway? So Dehancer is a film emulation plugin. So what does film emulation even mean? Film emulation is the process of converting digital footage to appear as if it was shot on film. This process works by matching the color values of digital footage to different film stocks. However, in this video, we will only be focusing or reviewing the photo plugins for both Lightroom and Photoshop. And as a bonus, Dehancer also has an ISO app compatible with both iPhones and iPads. Now, let's get into how to use the Dehancer photo plugin for Lightroom and Photoshop. First, let's start off with Lightroom. So I have Lightroom opened up. I've already done some minor editing. So what you're going to want to do is click Preferences. You're going to want to go to where it says External Editing. And you want to check your settings in Lightroom Classic. You want to make sure that the file format is in TIFF, that the color space is sRGB, and that for the bit depth is 16 bits. And then you want to make sure you use the same exact settings when exporting from Lightroom if you plan to process it later in Photoshop, which for my editing workflow, I do usually use both Lightroom and Photoshop. I usually start in Lightroom and then I do some more final refinements within Photoshop. So if this is you as well, you're going to want to make sure that you do this step. It's a very important step if you're using the Dehancer photo plugin for Lightroom. So once that is done, you can hit OK. So my original photograph needed some cleaning up and some smoothing out on the background. So I quickly threw it into Photoshop and I cleaned up the backdrop by smoothing it out, and then I imported it back into Lightroom. I go right click again. Now you're going to see it says Edit in Dehancer Lightroom exe. So you're going to want to click into that, and now a new window will open. It will say Edit Photo with Dehancer Lightroom.exe, and it will give you three different options. Option 1 is either we can edit a copy with Lightroom adjustments. Option 2 is we can edit a copy, and option 3 is we can edit the original. The best choice for, in my instance, is to do number 1, which is to edit a copy with Lightroom adjustments. So now that we finally have Dehancer opened up and we have our license activated, we can now use Dehancer. Yay! So first, what we're going to go over is the left-hand side panel. So the left panel, you will notice that there are what's called film profiles. These are all the different type of film profiles that Dehancer has to offer. There are many different options. You have all the different Fujifilm, all the different Kodak, and many more. Many that I have never even heard of, because as you know, I shoot mainly digital. I've never actually ever photographed anything with film, so this is all very new to me. So you have many different film profiles to choose from to get the look you really want. So you can select different film profiles by selecting different pictures. Each film profile will have a slightly different or even drastically different look to it, because they're each different, obviously. So you can select different film profiles by selecting different pictures here, which I personally think is easier because you can literally see what it looks like before clicking on it, and then you already will have kind of like an idea of what it's going to look like here in the preview. So that's pretty straightforward, self-explanatory. So there's also something else that's called, you'll notice there's a push and pull feature for the exposure. Since it is film, you can either push or pull your film. Now, if you are new to film or have no knowledge of film, just like I didn't and still barely before learning how to use Dehancer, I didn't know what push and pull meant, so I had to do some research to figure out what that even meant. So pushing or pulling film happens during the developing stage. It enables shooting at a consistent ISO rating, eliminating the need for constant adjustment of exposure settings during the shooting stage. So this can basically streamline the shooting process and make it easier to work in varying lighting conditions. So pushing and pulling are not the same thing. There is a huge difference. So you're going to want to understand what that means. To push film, basically pushing film is a technique used by a lot of photographers who need that extra stop of light, most likely because they are shooting in low light conditions. Now, pushing film is also especially popular on black and white film stocks, but it can also be used on colored film as well. Now, pulling film is the exact opposite of pushing film. In this instance, you don't need more light in your camera, but you actually need less light. So you can sort of play around with that and see how it changes or manipulates your photo, but that is just a brief synopsis of what pushing and pulling film means, so you have an idea before you use that feature. So now on the right-hand side of our panel, or our right-hand side panel, you'll see what's called source. So I'm just going to hit the drop-down arrow. This controls our temperature composition, defringe, and defringe radius. So you use this feature in order to even out the color temperature of your photograph. If you adjust the temperature composition to the left, it will go blue, a lot cooler and a lot bluer. And if you adjust it to the right, it will turn yellow. And quickly, you can see that is now a lot warmer tones, more yellowish hue. If you adjust the tint composition to the left, it will go green. And if you adjust it to the right, it will turn magenta. So I'm going to expand, no pun intended. So you have your black points and you have your white points. Basically, expand is another type of exposure, and it can bring up the white points and bring down the black points, or vice versa. So that's pretty much about it as far as expand. So let's go ahead and mess around with this too, so you can see what this does. So as you can see, as I slide it over to the left, it's making the black look a lot more faded because I'm reducing the black points. Now, if I bring it to the right, would obviously be increasing the black points. Now that is obviously way too drastic. So let's just bump that back a little bit. Wow, that actually looks really, really cool. Now I'm going to play around with the white points so you can see what that does to the photo. So first I slide it to the left, which increased the white points. Now you can see your face is pretty washed out. It looks a little bit off. Maybe I will reduce that just a little bit so it's not so drastic. Now let's increase our white points and see what that does to our photo. So obviously it does the opposite, where it looks a lot darker. So next we have print, and as you see here in this drop down menu, there's all these different types of printing profiles that you can choose from for your photograph. Let's say if you were to print this out. Let's take a look at some of these features that you can do within the print feature. So you can up the exposure or down the exposure. So the exposure obviously works as exposure does. If you've ever edited a photo in Lightroom or in Camera Raw and Photoshop, it pretty much works the exact same way. It's exactly the same way in Dehancer. There's also tonal contrast, which allows us to contrast all the blacks. So it's basically going to bring up the blacks. Color density is a great way to bring out more rich colors in our image. For example, the reds, the greens. So obviously I increased it, and I think that looks really amazing. It's obviously a lot more contrasty. I know, not a word, but I'm making it up. So lastly, we have saturation, which is obviously pretty self-explanatory. Light it to the left, you are desaturating your photo, which will make it black and white. And if you do the opposite and slide it to the right, you are going to make the colors in our image obviously more saturated. Okay, so that's pretty much it for print. So next we have color head. So basically color head allows you to shift the colors more precisely to tweak the color just a little bit more accurately. So this is really going to help you, allow you to really fine tune your image and get into some really serious like color correction. This is really great for basically like color correction. Let's say you had an image that was perhaps too bright of a color and you want to bring it back to a more natural color, so you can actually tweak that within color head. There's yellow to blue, there's magenta to green, and there's cyan to red. And then you'll see these sliders here that says pressure, exposure, and then impact. So you can really tweak, that's where the tweaking and the fine tuning comes into part, because you can really manipulate this to a point where it's exactly the color you want. Put it more to the left, it obviously becomes more yellow. If I put it more to the right, it obviously becomes more blue. You see what happened there? And now let's adjust the impact. Oh, that might have been too much. So now it's blue, but it's a little less blue. It's not as pronounced. So now, next we have film grain. So first of all, what is film grain? For those of you who don't already know what film grain is those random physical textures made from small metallic silver particles found on processed photographic celluloid, also known as granularity. This can vary in size, not just due to its random nature, but by the size of the image shrinking or increasing grains. So some of the film grain characteristics that you'll notice is grainy images featuring specks, noisy looking texture on an image, and warm texture to an image. So going back to Dehancer, basically film grain is just that. And as you can see here, there is a size slider, a mount slider. So as you can see, I just adjusted the amount slider. I increased it and made the film grain a lot larger than it already was. So we can already see that visible difference. There is a resolution slider, a shadows slider, a midtone slider, a highlight slider, and a color slider. And you're able to change the different film type as well as the different mode. So as far as film type, you can choose from negative and several others. And as far as mode, you can choose from analog and so on. So you're basically able to manipulate how the film grain appears or looks on your photograph, which is really cool. So next we have halation. What is halation? Halation is the spreading of light beyond its proper boundaries to form a fog around the edges of a bright image in a photograph or on a television screen. You can amplify it or change the impact of it to how much halation there is. The great thing about halation is that it allows you to edit halation without having to do any weird color corrections. It gives you those soft red tones on more of the highlighted sections of your photo. So next we have bloom, which allows you to bloom the highlights more and make your photo look a little bit softer, giving it more of a cinematic look. So bloom has several different sliders as well. Bloom has several sliders such as highlights, source limiter, details, diffusion, amplify, save lights, saturation, and impact. So you can play around with these until you get your desired look for your photo. Alright, so we finally made it to the last category on the right hand side panel called Vignette. If you've been in the photography industry for a while or know anything about photography and about photography editing, I'm sure you are familiar with the Vignette style. If you don't already know what Vignette is, let's first go over that so you know what I'm even talking about. So basically, Vignette is often regarded as the darker corners or edges around a photograph, and they will either be darker, like sort of a blackish hue, or sometimes people will do a lighter white vignette and it will be white corners or edges around a photograph. So the most popular photography craze associated with heavily vignetted images is lomography. It is often a desired technique to emphasize or focus on the motif and is a technique replicable in the darkroom. So as you have noted, it is definitely more of a thing within film photography. So firstly, you'll notice there is an exposure slider, is a size slider, which you can manipulate the size of the vignette, basically how much or how little vignette you want on your image. In the definition, the vignette will typically only be around the edges or the corners of your photograph. It's not going to be over the entirety of your photograph. And then there is a feather and aspect ratio slider as well. So let's play around with some of these so we can see how the vignette looks on our photograph. All right, so now it's time to export our photo from Dehancer. So all you have to do is click OK. That lets Dehancer know that you finished editing or are finished, and that will take you back to Lightroom. So just export it how you normally would, and here are the results. Here is the raw file. Here is the photo that when I edited, when I did minor adjustments in Lightroom, and then I fixed the backdrop in Photoshop. And here is my color grade with Dehancer. Now let me show you how you can access or use the Photoshop plugin, the Dehancer plugin for Photoshop. Going back to Lightroom, we're not going to leave Lightroom. We're just going to right click on the original image. You're going to click edit in, and then you're going to choose either edit in Adobe Photoshop 2024, or you also have the option of opening it as a smart object in Photoshop. Go up top where it says filter, and then you're gonna go all the way to the bottom where it says Dehancer. You're gonna go click where it says Dehancer film. And that should then open up or launch Dehancer with the Photoshop plugin. And as you can see, Dehancer is now opened up again. It looks exactly the same as we had it before, and then you can just edit it and then you can use Dehancer just like we did with Lightroom. Same exact settings, so I'm not going to go reiterate everything that we just went over. If you were thinking about getting Dehancer for yourself and trying it out, make sure you use my promo code Rivera10 for a 10% discount to use towards the Dehancer photo or video plugins for desktop, because I am an affiliate for Dehancer and I really stand behind this amazing new photo and video plugin. Moment to thank our sponsor for today's video, Dehancer. Thank you so much, because without you guys, this video would not even been possible to create. All right, so let's talk about some of these pros and cons of Dehancer. I'm giving a very honest review. One of the pros is that Dehancer excels in accurately replicating the look and feel of various analog film types. It allows photographers to achieve that nostalgic vintage aesthetic in their digital images, and Dehancer produces very high quality results with details and realistic film-like textures and colors. Like, I was literally floored when I started messing with film grain and some of the other features as well, because I felt like it looked very, very realistic, and I was very impressed by that. Dehancer also offers a wide range of customization options, allowing users to adjust parameters such as grain, contrast, saturation, color balance to fine-tune their desired effect. And each of these features, when I say fine-tune, it is like down to every single detail, like the amount of effort they put into this to be able to really manipulate your photos to make them look more film-like is just absolutely mind-boggling. Also, Dehancer seamlessly integrates with popular photo and video editing softwares like Adobe Photoshop, Lightroom, Affinity Photo, Capture One, DaVinci Resolve, Premiere Pro, and Final Cut Pro. So, making it convenient for users who are already familiar with these programs, which I think is a huge plus. So, it is awesome that it can do that. And then lastly, my last pro is that it is also convenient on the go with the new addition of its ISO app for iPhone and iPad. And you just can't beat that. To be able to edit your photos like film on the go, that's a huge plus as well. So now for the cons. So while Dehancer offers extensive customization options, actually mastering these features can require some time and effort, especially for beginners who are not familiar with analog photography techniques, and just photographers who aren't that familiar with film, period. Which, since they are targeting digital photographers, because they're targeting digital photographers to have their photos look like film, they're gonna run into many photographers like myself who are just not very familiar with film and don't have a clue about film at all. So for somebody who doesn't know much about film to go in to use Dehancer, it can be a little difficult at first. Like, there is a bit of a learning curve. Secondly, applying Dehancer effects to multiple images may slow down your editing process and even your computer, depending on if you're editing on an older, less powerful computer. Your computer may not be able to handle it. It might take you a while to do each one by one. Thirdly is the price. It is $200 for the photo plugin, and that is for lifetime access, which isn't too bad. But let's say if that's not within your budget, for those of us who are in tight budgets, that might not be very affordable. For the 1 year license, it is $129. For 6 months, it would be $89. And then for the 3 months, it would be $69. And then obviously they have a free trial, but if you want to get the most out of it, obviously you might want longer than just a week free trial. And then as far as the video plugin for lifetime access, it is $449. So very close to that nearly $500 mark, which is going to be pretty steep. And then for the 1 year, it's $299. For 6 months, it's $199. And for 3 months license, it's $149. So lastly, my last con was that I did have run into like a small bug or issue when I was trying to use the newest version of Dehancer, where basically the preview photo that was supposed to be in the center of my screen, basically the photo that I'm editing to be able to preview all the edits and color grading that I'm adding onto my photo, I couldn't really see the effects I was giving the photo because the photo just wouldn't load in the center like it's supposed to be in the preview. So I was subject to have to download the older version of Dehancer, which still works totally great and fine. It just was a bit of a downer because I really wanted to try out the newest version and review the newest version for you guys, and I wasn't able to do that because of that small bug. However, I was able to contact Dehancer support. They contacted me and helped me find a solution. They allowed me to download the previous version before that, and it worked just fine. So that little bug, I don't know if anyone else has run into that issue thus far who has used Dehancer, but that is one con that I would say was kind of a minor setback for me. But all in all, I have nothing but good things to say about Dehancer. Despite these few cons, I still give it 5 out of 5 stars because I still think it's a wonderful plugin. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you got some value out of it. I hope you learned something new. Drop me a like. If you have a question, drop it down in the comments. Smash that like button. Subscribe to the channel if you are not already. And I will catch you all in the next one. Peace.